Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our State of the State event. This is something that we have been holding every year for the past several years, and great information in terms of what's happening at the state capitol and how we're getting through this pandemic and so many other issues that the governor will speak to in just a moment. I do have some announcements I would like to make about upcoming events that you should be aware of. First of all, we have a legislative update coming up on Thursday, March 11th. That's next week. It is from 9 to 10 a.m. We have a terrific panel. David Jubei from the Business and Industry Association, Phil Sletton from New Hampshire Fiscal Policy Institute, and Dean Spiliotis from New Hampshire Political Capital. They'll form the panel. Ari Pollack from Gallagher, Callahan, and Gartrell will be facilitating that panel. So looking forward to that on March 11th from 9 to 10 a.m. Then I want to draw your attention to a webinar we have in partnership with the SBA. This is SBA Disaster Program to Assist Small Business. That is March 18th from 10:30 to 11:30 a.m. And by the way, all these are free and open to all businesses, and you can register for these online at the Chamber website, concordnhchamber.com. So please feel free to do that. Then finally, I just want to let you know that we are celebrating our Citizen of the Year on Tuesday, March 30th. This is a sort of a quasi event where we're taking place at the Bank of New Hampshire stage downtown. It will be live streamed. Most people will be attending virtually, but we'll live stream the celebration itself from the Bank of New Hampshire stage. So please sign up for that event. I think you'll like it very much. Real quickly, just some logistics. We will have there's an opportunity to do a Q&A at this event towards the end of the governor's remarks. And at the bottom of your screen, you will see a Q&A button. So anytime during the presentation, hit the Q&A button, type in your question. You can do it anonymously or you can give your name, and then we'll get through as many questions at the end as possible. And I see the governor is with us. Governor, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome. And before we get started, I just wanted to thank Lincoln Financial. They have sponsored this event for many years, and we're very, very grateful to them. And we have with us to introduce the governor, Paul Farrell. Paul is Assistant Vice President of Business Assessment for Lincoln Financial, and he will do the honor of introducing the governor.
Thank you, Tim. On behalf of the hundreds of Lincoln employees in Concord and the surrounding towns, it's my pleasure to sponsor this monthly forum, State of the State with Governor Sununu. Lincoln's proud to support the Greater Concord Chamber of Commerce and remains committed to the Concord community. In 2020, Lincoln Financial made grants of almost $500,000 to Concord and New Hampshire charitable programs. In 2021, we've continued that work with the school food pantry at Broken Ground School, started by Lincoln employees, and a new $5,000 sponsorship of the Concord's Friendly Kitchen. Now, allow me to introduce Governor Christopher T. Sununu, serving as the 82nd governor of the state of New Hampshire, who's currently serving his third term. As we all witnessed in 2020, Governor Sununu led the state through the COVID-19 pandemic. He worked to allocate over $500 million to small businesses. In 2018, Governor Sununu announced the nationwide launch of his recovery-friendly workplace initiative to engage employers and empower workplaces to provide support for people recovering from substance use disorder. The governor has garnered a number of awards for driving policies that improve health and wellness for all Granite Staters. I was surprised to learn that after growing up in Salem, New Hampshire, he graduated from MIT. Then, as an environmental engineer, Chris worked for 10 years cleaning up hazardous waste sites across the country. Governor Sununu now lives in Newfields with his wife Valerie and their 3 children. I look forward to learning about the state of the state, and we thank the governor for his services and for joining us this morning. So we welcome you, Governor.
Well, thank you. That was a great introduction. I appreciate it. And I know it's a little funky being on Zoom. I think we're all getting used to it. Hopefully not too used to it, because I think we're all looking forward to being back in the same room and being able to have a cup of coffee and actually shake hands and look at each other a little more in the less digital eye, so to say. But what I thought I'd do is there's so much we could talk about, right? Whether we could talk about the budget, we can talk about what's going on with COVID and the vaccinations. There's just so much out there. What's happening on a national level, transition of the administrations down in Washington, and some of the differences there. But what I thought I'd do is just to kind of take a step back, maybe take 5 or 10 minutes, and then really, if you don't mind, opening up for questions and anything you guys want to ask. I mean, I really encourage the questions very much. It allows me to know kind of what's happening out there a little bit. So let's take a step back. I'm not going to waste everyone's time and talk about what COVID was and what it meant to the state. I think that's evident because it's all in our own story, right? It didn't just happen to the governor and the state house and the budget. It happened to literally every individual, every family, every student, every business. Everyone had to change and adapt. Nobody was immune from the difficulties, the challenges that COVID really presented to us. One thing we tried to do early on, and I guess it's a management style thing with me. It was just over a year ago, right, that we had our first case, March 2nd. It was a pretty amazing time. I could write stories just on the month of March. I could write volumes of books, but it was coincidentally, it was a morning I had pre-scheduled a press conference with Senator Shaheen, Senator Hassan, Congresswoman Custer, Congressman Pappas, which is a very rare thing to do anyway, but we had coincidentally decided that, and Dr. Chan came in just prior to that meeting and said, it's here. We got our first case confirmed. It was up in the Hanover area. And then what happened literally over the next 30 days was nothing any of us could have imagined. We knew COVID would be here. We saw what was happening across the world. We saw what was happening in, for me especially, I was watching a lot in Italy and some of the Western European countries where individuals literally couldn't go to the doctor, couldn't go to the hospital anymore. They were just dying in their homes. Those were very, very scary times. And everything escalated very rapidly. It didn't over-escalate. I think we were taking the appropriate steps as we wrote the playbook on this thing as we were playing a new game, right? We were kind of learning how, we were creating the rules of the game as we were going through it. And at a time when there weren't very many others there. So, I knew that I had to take a lot of those decisions on. And in a crisis moment, from a leadership perspective, transparency is always your friend. There's always a hesitancy there, I think, this could be in your business or in your family or even as governor, whatever it might be. There can be a hesitancy of, gee, in a crisis, we don't know what's going to happen next. Do we really want to telegraph everything? Yes. The lesson that we challenged ourselves to be super, super transparent so that I knew very early on, if we were going to tell people we're all in this together, we had to truly be all in this together. And you do that with information, with data, with the science, with what I know, right? And we were doing the press conferences pretty much every day at that point. And we did that for the purpose of making sure that everybody not just knew what variables we were looking at when we made these very, very tough decisions. And I also accepted early on that I was going to make decisions that pretty much everybody would be upset with at one time or another. That's just, again, the nature of the responsibility of leadership. It's fine. I got big shoulders. I can handle it. But it really was about making decisions not for one constituency or one town or one city or one type of business. It was really about making decisions so everyone was on an even playing field. All 1.4 million of our citizens were treated as evenly and as fairly as we could, knowing that we were going to be asking a lot in terms of sacrifices ourselves and everybody else. So we did a lot of the transparency stuff. The other thing with those press conferences early on, and I harp on the press conferences a lot because they were such a tool in the process, was that I wanted to make sure that the press could ask anything they wanted, as much as they wanted, to the point where you got no more, they literally would run out of questions. Every day, my goal was to get to the point where the press would have nothing left to ask me. And so some of them would go a little long. I get it. I can be a little long-winded and some of those questions can be a little long. But again, we never wanted to say, hey, we've run out of time, you public. I gotta get back behind closed doors. No. We wanted to give all of our time and all of our effort to that public transparency. It was a very important leadership, I think, decision that we made early on. And I think it proved out to be very, very valuable. It was tough. I mean, a lot of times things happen and boy, we got some bad news to deliver. You deliver the bad news. We had a problem with our scheduling system. You own it. You own it. You can't be expected. People aren't going to have the trust that you can fix a problem if you don't have the courage to own it. And there's nothing wrong with owning problems. You know, the problem, if we ever had a bump in the road or a problem through COVID, it wasn't intentional. It wasn't through, you know, sheer negligence. It was just because, hey, sometimes as we were writing the playbook, things with COVID would happen that we were completely unexpecting. And that happened all over the country. And I think for the most part here in New Hampshire, we handled it very, very well. We got incredibly good at getting PPE. We got incredibly good. Remember the great toilet paper crisis of 2020, right? You know, you literally couldn't find paper towels and toilet paper in a store. We laugh about it a little bit now, but in the moment, that was a big, big deal. We literally, where the truck driver is going to come to deliver the limited amount of products, we were opening our stores early so that especially the elderly who just had a tougher time kind of getting to the stores on a rapid basis, they'd kind of have first shot at it, if you will. And so we laugh now, but we went through some pretty tough stuff. And then you add in the regulations, the reopen stuff, how we were handling the summer. It turned out to be a much stronger summer and a much better summer than any of us could have expected, both in terms of keeping COVID low and with a very, very strong economy. Now, you know, some restrictions in there. We were able to do it without mask orders and all that. But back in August and September, if you remember, we were predicting, look, November is going to be a massive surge. It's coming. And we tried to warn everyone. One thing we got very good at was predicting and looking at data. If you follow data and science and historical trends, unfortunately, we were right in that the surge was so huge in November, but it also meant that we were prepared. We knew what was coming, and we were ready to put in some additional restrictions or stipulations in place to do everything we could to mitigate that very aggressive spread that we saw in the fall. And that's exactly what we did. And again, it worked out very, very well for us. We knew the outbreaks would be there in our long-term care facilities. We always were on top of it. We always made sure that they had everything they needed, the testing, the PPE, whatever it was. Obviously, you know, one thing we've learned through the COVID pandemic from the very early days was when you get an outbreak in long-term care, it just goes like wildfire. It really does. But we had already kind of pre-sectioned off a lot of the long-term care facilities. So if there was an outbreak, we tried to keep it just to one unit or one corridor or one wing, whatever it was. So, and hats off, obviously, to the staff. Let's not forget, you know, we gave them a lot of thanks. They deserved a lot of thanks. But let's not forget that the doctors and the nurses, especially, that are still out there 20 hours a day sometimes, taking care of our loved ones when we can't be there for them for whatever reason. We can't say thank you enough, and should never stop, because that was such a huge part of the successful model we had here in the state. Every state is different, right? Every state, as you put in new restrictions, as you take off restrictions, every state has different variables. Well, I shouldn't say that. I think every state is looking at relatively the same variables: fatality, hospitalization, the rate of vaccine administration. Those are some of the key things. But every state's where they are in their process, it might be all different. So, you know, as some states are starting to open up restrictions, they just have very different dynamics, Texas or Mississippi or Florida or whatever it might be. And so every state has to chart their own path. This is not a one-size-fits-all issue. I know Washington likes to do that. Well, we'll just do one big blanket process. And sometimes it's fair. Sometimes it's very unevenly handed, and that can be a little frustrating for a governor, of course. But you know, at the end of the day, every state and every governor is really on the front lines of this. A Republican and Democrat always were talking to other governors. I was always talking to them, sometimes 3 or 4 times a week. A lot of us would just get on the phone together and just bat around ideas. How are you dealing with this issue? How are you dealing with that issue? Are your super sites working? How are you dealing with testing? How accurate are the antigen tests? What are you hearing out of Washington? I mean, it was sometimes hours and hours just talking to all the other governors in a very bipartisan way. For the most part, we all get along really, really well. It's not like Congress or the Senate or anything, thank goodness, because we were all on the front lines, all dealing with issues that really weren't political at all. It was just about good management and the health and safety of our citizens while trying to balance a strong economy. The CARES Act money came in. Let's talk about that a little bit. So if folks remember, we had to spend all the CARES Act money by December 31st. And so some states had to take all their CARES Act money, billions and billions sometimes. We got 1.25 billion. And they had to put everything towards testing, or they just put everything into their hospital system. We tried to take a different approach. We made sure we had enough for testing, hospitals, health and safety, and dealing with COVID. That's what was always the first priority. But then we also knew that the economic toll was going to be very big. So we were the first state to create a Main Street Relief Fund. And still, I think one of the only states. I think only about 10 other states tried to copy what we did. We just did it bigger and better than everybody else, frankly. We were one of the only states to do a nonprofit relief fund. We were the only state that did a self-employment fund for folks, because it was all about keeping people employed, going through tough times. Because when a business shuts down, it's so hard to get that to open again. When a nonprofit shuts down that's providing vital services, it's so hard to get that going again. So even if you're just keeping it alive, we wanted all those businesses to survive and be part of a very, very strong economy that I had predicted was going to happen in 21. And that's exactly what we're seeing. Did some businesses close? Yes. I mean, frankly, with all the money that was coming out, the vast majority of those businesses were probably going to close, you know, on a tough path anyway. We had less business closures in 2020 than we did in 2019. Think about that. We had less business closures in New Hampshire in 2020 than we did in 2019, because there was just so much opportunity from the federal government bringing in the PPP loans, ourselves doing about $500 million to all these different employment opportunities. That was dollar for dollar more than any state, California, New York, anything. And we're just little old New Hampshire here. But by doing that, we created that balance and allowed a lot of folks to have opportunity to not just survive, but even thrive in some cases. And now, as all this additional cash is being released into the economy, all this new opportunity, we're doing very, very well here. I think 2021 is going to be like rocket fuel. I do. I think it's just going to be a booming, booming economy. I tell people to plan big, book big, get ready for a great, great summer. We're not there yet, but all the indicators all the negative indicators are dropping, which is a good thing. We're on a very, very positive path. Vaccine administration is going faster than we anticipated. We've gotten pretty good at it here. And so I think that everything is on track for a really, really good summer. We'll pull back if we have to, but right now there's no indication that that our predictions are off. Everything is kind of lining up as we originally anticipated. And then finally, I'll touch a little bit upon the budget. You know, the way the process works, I put a state budget in. I technically submitted the first week in February, but we kind of closed the books on revenue projections and all that at least by mid to late January. And then we build off of that. So we had a $400 million problem last summer. I managed that down to about a $50 million hole. And to be honest, since I've submitted the budget, that $50 million hole is pretty much gone. The revenues just keep coming in, just over the past month and a half, keep coming in at unbelievable rates. So, you know, the few pullbacks on grants or programs or anything like that we did, and there weren't many, but the few that we did, we actually submitted a letter to the legislature today that said it should all go back in, the small business development group and all that kind of stuff. That is all we're recommending, that all goes back in because we have the money to do it. And that's a really, really huge opportunity for us. So I just think the budget is a great opportunity. We're not too aggressive with our revenue projections going forward. I think we're right on target. They're going to be strong. I think hotels and restaurants could kind of be a little up, a little down over the next year. But, you know, in terms of the business taxes that come in, the BET and BPT, it's going to be very, very strong. So strong that I'm pushing business tax cuts across the board. We can do that. The interest and dividends tax, people have been trying to get rid of that for 60 years. We're going to start that process of getting rid of it. Lowering the business enterprise tax, lowering the meals, the room and meals tax, right? So you can just not have to pay quite as much going out to dinner. And people will say, well, it's 0.5% here and 0.5% there. Does that really matter? Yes. Absolutely, it matters. Because how do we get such high tax rates in the first place? Year over year, people say, well, we'll increase it 0.5%, 1/4%, 0.5%. Does it really matter? The citizens won't feel it that much. It all adds up. That's a lot of drops in the bucket. And now we have some of the toughest tax rates in terms of room and meals and business taxes. We're going in the opposite direction now, and we continue to lower those, which is, I think, a huge opportunity across the spectrum of our citizens. Everyone should be able to participate in that. That drives businesses to come in. That drives more people moving into the state. Huge opportunity to keep growing and just outpacing, as we have been for the past few years, just keep outpacing New England and the rest of the Northeast, taking advantage of it. So the last 3 or 4 years, we've done great in terms of a business perspective. A lot of folks are moving in. A lot of businesses want to expand here. Other states are going to be raising taxes and going in the opposite direction. That's where we need to put our foot in the gas and go faster. And I think just show what that New Hampshire advantage is all about. Look, I could go on all day. I will do my best not to. I guess I can take a step back. We can take some questions, open it up for a more organic discussion. But there's a lot of opportunity out there over the next couple of years, to be sure. But I'd love to hear from you guys, see what's on your mind and where you think things are going.
Thank you very much, Governor. I love your optimism. It brightens up the day a bit. So I'll just say that it's good to hear good news. We do have a number of questions, and I'm going to run these through for you, and we'll do this as long as we can. But I promise you'd have you out of here by 9 o'clock. So we'll start right off the bat. Okay, so we had a couple of questions regarding Sbdc funding. I know that in your budget that's being scaled back quite a bit. So could you just comment on that? There's just some concern about that.
So the Sbdc is not a state program. I think that's one of the misconceptions. It's a grant that we give to the university, and then they run the program. So the university gets grants from all different locations. One of the thoughts was, okay, if we have to cut something back, one of the areas we can cut back was the grant, knowing that the university could still go out and get the match funds, because that's what we're providing. The state's giving them the match funds for that program. So obviously, I think there was a lot of concern over that. The good news is, as I had mentioned, revenues still keep coming in, and there's no reason the legislature can't put that right back in, and they should. And I put a letter out to them saying, put those dollars back in. They're there. It's a good program. There's no doubt about it. I mean, a lot of good programs had to kind of be scaled back a little bit with our $50 million potential shortfall. That doesn't exist anymore because we just keep managing the heck out of this thing. And so there's opportunity there, and I feel confident the legislature will put that money back in as they should.
Thank you for that. Another question here, question about travel restrictions. What travel restrictions will change and when, now that people are getting vaccinated?
Well, we have no travel restrictions anywhere in New England. So, which is makes up 85% of all of our travel with family, business, whatever. We have other states in New England, I think, still do. We don't. The only restrictions we really have in place are traveling for purely recreational purposes outside of New England. We are still asking folks to quarantine. The reason for that is that we still have a vulnerable, we're not fully through groups 1A and 1B yet. 1A is done. 1B represents kind of the remainder of that really, really vulnerable population of 65 and older. We'll be really through that when they have their shots and their shot is in. We're just not there yet. We're very close, but we're not there yet. So I think we'll be looking at adjusting those travel restrictions, but it's all based on the rate of vaccination, which is going faster than we thought, but we're just not there. So probably at least a few more weeks or another month or so. But that's really just on purely recreational travel. The hope is that obviously by Memorial Day at the latest, I mean, we're really looking at a lot of flexibility, if not completely, because we're just going so fast with the vaccination process.
Okay, next is more of a comment than a question. Governor, you were only one of 2 governors in the country to allocate CARES Act funds for not-for-profit cultural and arts venues, a decision that has kept all of them alive and poised to come out to operate again once we can gather in public. This isn't a question, but a profound thank you. So I just thought I'd pass that along.
No, sure. Look, let me, if I could comment, I did nonprofits, but then I did a whole separate thing for live venues. For that very reason, we knew, and I still believe, they're the toughest things to come back. Because asking, 1,000 people to come into a room and sit, shoulder to shoulder with each other to watch a play or a performance, even when we're through vaccination, we just know that people are just naturally going to be hesitant about it. So I created a fund specifically for that. We have a lot of historical venues here, especially, and it goes back to that concept of if they were to have to close, and they were all on the precipice of closing. Reopening isn't like just, we're going to dust it off and unlock the door and we'll be fine. It's a whole process to reopen. So we put a lot of money, millions of dollars in to protecting those venues. And again, I still think it's going to be some time before they come back. And so we're going to kind of keep revisiting them and seeing what their needs are over the next year. If we have to keep doing something, we'll try to do that. The federal government did not pass, from the CARES Act to the surge we got in November, the feds didn't pass a single extra bit of help for us. No bills. And I get very frustrated with that. There was a $500 billion CARES Act relief bill in October. Our own delegation voted it down. It was very frustrating. They finally voted on something on December 27th, way after the fact. But be that as it may, the one thing that did do was it extended our ability to use CARES Act funds beyond December 31st of last year. We had already spent all the money because the rule said we had to. So there's no money left in the till. We had 3 days left. Obviously, all the dollars had gone out the door. But a lot of businesses did better than they originally thought. So what we anticipate is over the next couple months, as business taxes keep rolling in, by federal rule, those businesses have to remit some of those Main Street relief dollars back to the state because they just did way better. We provided that financial security so they could stay open and take a little more risk during tough times. But as that risk paid off, they made more money than they did in their previous years. That delta differential has to come back to us. Now, we don't want to send it back to the federal government. So the opportunity here is if we can get maybe 10 or $20 million of that 1.25 billion back into the state, because back to at the state level, because businesses did better than they thought, we could still reallocate that out for similar types of programs. And we're looking at that. We don't know how much is really going to come back in the next couple of months, but there is an opportunity for potentially more types of CARES Act programs that we saw in 2020 to come back and just kind of top off some of the needs in 21.
Thank you. I'm going to paraphrase this next question a little bit, but it has to do with schools getting back to normal, given that, you know, social distancing and all those issues that have helped us along the way. What is your thinking in terms of bringing students and teachers back into the classroom and getting back to normal classroom routine?
So that kids have to start coming back into the classroom if they haven't already. And there's only a few schools that haven't by this coming Monday. I put that out a couple of weeks ago. We gave them, you know, schools have already been gearing up for, you know, whenever they're going to do it. We gave them a couple extra weeks between the time I announced it and this coming Monday. And I think they're all going to do it because they really have to. And they can come in even if it's only a couple days a week. They really need to get these kids back in front of the teachers. And I could go on all day. Most of you have probably heard me talk about the need for students to be in the classroom. Kids want to be in the classroom. Parents want to be in the classroom. Teachers want to be in the classroom. I know the teachers union has been fighting this since day one. They're wrong, just to be blunt about it. And so we're bringing the kids back in at least 2 days a week is what I've kind of mandated. As we move down the line, as more folks get vaccinated, you know, we can look at 5 days a week. I think that would be phenomenal. The reason is as the CDC has said, as we've always said, you don't need to be vaccinated to go back into school. We haven't had any major outbreaks in schools, none since September. And that's a testament to the teachers in the schools changing the way they do things, but finding a way to do it and finding a way to do it safely. And so there's literally hundreds of school models out there of success. There's no reason these last few schools can't look at some of those models of success and be just as successful, right? There's no reason to think that they can't manage. There's hesitancy on some of their parts. It's for the wrong reasons, to be blunt about it. But kids that do have to be back in classroom at least 2 days a week starting this Monday. And we'll look at making it a full 5 days a week and getting back to real normal, hopefully, you know, sooner than later.
Thank you. This next question, do you anticipate releasing the guidelines for summer camps reopening soon? There were some concerns within that question relative to staffing up and students getting out of college and the timing. So we're looking at some loosening some of the restrictions around summer camps and both day programs and overnight programs. We haven't made any decisions yet, but I'll tell you this: plan big, staff up, plan big, plan for a lot of flexibility. There's no reason to think that we're not going to get there. We're not there yet, and we haven't finalized any of it, but I'm just, from a general 30,000 foot level, I'd be shocked if we didn't allow a lot of flexibility in those programs because they already proved themselves to be very successful and very safe. And it isn't, are we going to have a lot of COVID? Could you get COVID outbreaks at a summer camp? Absolutely you could. But those kids are so less susceptible and vulnerable to hospitalization and fatality. We know that now. And now that we have that data and understanding, that can provide a lot of flexibility. It's all about making sure that their grandparents or their parents or those that might be more vulnerable to COVID, that they've had a shot at the vaccine, that they are the ones that we're really making sure we prioritize and protect. And we will definitely be able to be there by summer's end. So anyone who's in that business, plan big, book big. I think it's going to be a great summer. Okay. Regarding the Main Street Relief Fund, we received 1099s for what is our tax money. Why are we being taxed again? And why are we being taxed on money that we may have to return to the state after we evaluate our sales? Right.
So I know the legislature is looking at this, and whatever they can legally do, we're supportive of. I think where the confusion is the federal, they're not being taxed on the federal side, but they may be taxed on the state side because of the current law. So if the legislature is looking at changing that and they can do it, I think that's great. I don't know. I'm not sure where they are in that process, but I do know they are looking at it. There's a bill that's being debated in the House and the Senate. And if it can happen, that would be wonderful. Obviously, we don't want to tax anybody anything that doesn't need to be taxed.
Okay. So we have a question from someone who has a wedding and videography business, and they're wondering when they can open back up to full capacity. No one wants to have pictures with masks on. So. Yeah,
I think it's soon. We're really not there. Because especially in the wedding business, you get grandparents coming, you get family members from out of state. There is still risk, without a doubt. I mean, we still have 80 people in the hospital today. It's way down from like 350, but we still have 80 people in the hospital today that do have COVID. We're still at about 250 cases a day, and we still have some fatalities. We had the first couple of days of 0 fatalities this past week. That was awesome, but we're not out of the woods yet, to be sure. So as spring and summer gear up, I have no doubt that weddings are going to do really well in the state of New Hampshire. I'll just say that. It's kind of like summer camps. I don't know why there's no data that says that we have to be in a complete restrictive mode as we enter. We had a successful year last year. We know a lot of people have been waiting, kind of putting off their weddings till this year. My sense is New Hampshire is going to be the place to be for weddings.
All right. So we have a question. Could you speak to House Bill 549 regarding Resilient Buildings Group, RBG? This individual is strongly opposed because they know it will jeopardize plans for expanding. So,
I apologize. Can you explain that? I don't know what 549 is. This is the 2000 bills, and I don't keep the numbers in my head.
Well, yeah, join the club here. This is a member of the Resilient Buildings Group. So I can't comment on that either, Governor, and I don't blame you for not having all 2000.
Is 549, is that the housing bill? Here, hold on. Give me 1 second here. Relative to energy efficient resource standard in the system benefits chart. I don't know. I apologize. I don't know that one off the top of my head. If it gets further down the road, I'll be happy to get back to you, Tim, if somebody wants to ask a specific question. But I can tell you that one definitely isn't hitting the top of my radar right now. But we'll take a look. And if it's something that we think will actually make it to my desk, we're happy to, I mean, these bills get, one thing with legislation is they all go through such changes, right? Through the House and the Senate and then back to conference. So I try not to pontificate too much on one bill or another, other than kind of my general feelings of it, because it can change in so many different ways. I don't know that one, but I'll be happy to get back to you.
Okay, thank you very much. That's fair enough. This person is asking you to comment about the decision to merge university and community college systems. There's some concern in this question about what those impacts would be, but could you comment on that, please?
Yeah, it's awesome. It is a huge opportunity that people have been talking about for 20 years. What we have seen over the past, even pre-COVID, was that enrollments were going down both of the community college and the university system. Something was going to have to change. A lot of mid-tier universities across the country were already on the precipice of closing. We saw a lot more people going to online learning and different models for that. And that can be a very good thing, but that's a change in the model. And then COVID comes and really accelerates the inevitable, which is your system has to change or it will die. And that's just it. These systems, if you keep running the same system today as we're running it 20, 25 years ago, you ain't gonna make it. So the opportunity we have is to do what we should have done a long time ago. Instead of having 11 different systems, essentially, 4 of the universities and the university system, 7 in the community college system, you bring them under one roof. Right now, when the community college and the university come to the state, they're fighting over government dollars. When they're going after students, they're fighting over students. They're all doing their online programs. They're fighting over their online programs, right? They're competing. Why? And what we're really focusing on this isn't about saving money. I mean, I think we're going to save money, but that's not what this is about. This is about just modernizing your system to the 21st century and understanding that as a student or a parent, and I'm a parent of a high school kid, we're looking at it. Why do we say you have to predetermine at 18 years old that you're in a 2-year program or a 4-year program? And if you're over here, you can't take classes over there. Why? Why do we do that? Why do we limit the options? This is a world now of limitless options. So our system has to adapt to that and adapt to the changing, I'd say the choices that customers, our students and our parents are looking for. And so what I'm saying is you create massive efficiency, right? You don't need 2 IT systems. You don't need 2 this and that. Everything is doubled. If you're on a path for a 2-year program that you can now seamlessly, you don't have to apply to a new program. You don't have to worry about your credits transferring over. You can now seamlessly start taking programs within the same system. Do you know right now we have over 100 agreements between UNH, business school, and community college business classes, whether the credits would transfer. And Manchester Community College has an agreement with Plymouth State over here, and Keene State has an agreement with Great Bay over there. It is a mess. It is an organizational disaster. Get rid of all that. Simplify the process and allow the students, maybe a student starts down the 4-year path and says, you know what, this isn't for me. Why are we telling them you got to get out of that system, reapply over here, blah, blah, blah. Make it seamless so that they can travel and design their career path as they see fit. You do that type of program. And then on the back end, you add on my student debt relief program, which doesn't cost taxpayers $1. It's over $10 million of student debt relief if you stay and work in New Hampshire, right? You create this seamless transition of not only allowing students the career path that they want on the education side, not limiting them in any way, and then giving them a warm handoff with student debt payback if you stay and work here in New Hampshire. So all these pieces really line up. But you can't keep going down and having the same old system and think it's going to keep working just fine. Those days are done. We have one of the best community college systems in the country, but it's still the second most expensive. One of the best university systems, the second most expensive. So there's definitely some savings in it. If we can save dollars, then you can really transfer some of those savings down onto the students and challenge ourselves for new models of how we charge them. Why do we charge every student the same in our university system when their pathways are so different? That doesn't make sense, right? Let's challenge ourselves to look at it a little differently. So all I've done is say we're going to bring the boards together and over the next year really design. I haven't prescribed or prescripted anything, letting them really design what this thing looks like. It might take a couple of years to get there, but you got to start that process because they're losing students left and right. We have to remain competitive, and you do that by providing a product that's really attractive to the customer.
Thank you. So this next question, I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit because I'm not sure the statement is accurate, but can you compare the vaccination rate in New Hampshire with other New England states? How are we doing compared to the rest of New England in terms of getting people vaccinated?
We're doing very well. I think we're ranked like 11th in the country for first shots or something like that. I mean, the CDC numbers kind of go up and down a little bit. I'm doing this off the top of my head, but we're all at about between 25,000 and 27,000 administered doses per 100,000 of the population. So we're all in that. That's just a metric that the CDC uses, and we're all kind of in that within a couple thousand of each other in that range. And it kind of fluctuates depending on what day you look at the data, what day we receive doses. You know, we have this huge super site we're going to do this week with all the Johnson & Johnson coming in. You know, as much vaccine as we get in, we put into arms. It's just, it's that simple. That's why we're going through Group 1B so fast. We're moving people up. As of this week, anyone who wanted to move up out of an April shot is out. Some people have chosen to stay there for whatever reason, that's fine. But if we contacted everyone that had a first shot in April and said, if you want to come to the super site this weekend, like March 5th, not April 5th, March 5th, a month ahead of schedule, you can do it. And you get one shot and you're done. We're going to move right into Group 2A and 2B very, very quickly here in the month of March. 2A is basically the teachers, and 2B is the next age band, either 45 or 50 and up. We have to decide. We have to look at the demographics. But those two next phases of 2A, we're going to come out of 1B, go into 2A and 2B almost simultaneously because we're just going so fast. So we're doing a great job. We really are. I mean, every state's a little different in terms of their systems, how they allocate, how much they use the hospitals, how much the state does on their own, how much they use their pharmacy system. It's all a little bit different. But here in New England, I can't speak for other states, but I think we're all in about the same range, between about 25 and 27,000 doses administered per 100,000 of the population. It's a weird metric they use, but that's just how we kind of normalize how fast we're getting it up.
Sure. Another one, in terms of the Best Buddies Friendship Walk, market days in downtown Concord, other public events in Concord and beyond, they're being planned. Do you see any reason why these can't move forward?
Book big, baby. Yeah, book big, move forward. Whether it's farmers markets, which we were able to do last year, because we had some restrictions around it and all that, just some basic rules, but there's no reason that it won't be even more. We don't anticipate it even being more flexible or completely flexible by this summer. Look, President Biden himself said every American should have a shot by the end of May. I don't know if that's true. I hope it is. But if that's the case, then, that's how you get out of COVID. We're never going to get COVID to zero. I mean, I hope we do, but I'm not planning on that, right? I'm planning on making sure that our fatality rate and our hospitalizations are extremely, extremely low. And we're well on our way to doing that. So whether it's Concord Market Day, the Concord Farmers Market that they do here, or market days where they kind of take all of Main Street, or out at the Deerfield Fair and the Sandwich Fair, or whatever it might be, folks should definitely plan. They should book, and they should book to be as back to normal as possible. If something really tragic happens, it's always easy to pull back as opposed to trying to scale up at the last minute. So our strategy is book big, plan big, because all the data says we should be able to get there.
Thank you. This next question, I'm not sure it's accurate, but I'm going to, out of respect for the writer, I'm going to pass it along to you. The writer is under the impression that, and who knows, that COVID vaccinations are restricted, the distribution of COVID vaccinations to veterans are restricted to those who are over 75 years old.
No, right now there's a couple different pathways for veterans in particular, but if you're over 65, anyone over 65 can get a shot, but no question about that. That's group 1B. If you have comorbidity, if you have any other medical issues, you can get a shot. So veterans, even if veterans are under 65, but they have other medical issues that put them at risk, you can get the shot. The federal VA is also going down their path, specifically the Manchester VA. They have a whole thing for veterans, and I think they've opened up for everybody. Is my understanding. That's a federally driven, the feds keep a lot of their vaccination, but I'm pretty sure they've opened up to all veterans can now get a shot at the Manchester VA. That was one of the agreements that we had, and that they're working with the federal government. So I think veterans are actually a bit ahead of the game, if anything. So if you're a veteran of any age and you haven't got a shot, definitely contact the Manchester VA. I think no matter what your age is, you can go get the vaccination today.
Okay. Can you talk about the mask mandate? It's set to expire March 31st. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, I want out of the mask mandate more than anybody else, but we're just not there yet. We'll kind of see where the data is. Things are changing very, very rapidly for the better, which is a good thing. But we have to really watch the data. We have to make sure that the vaccine is being administered to that vulnerable population as fast as we would like it to, and it is. That's good. We have to make sure that the fatality rate comes down like we think it will, and it has been. Same with the hospitalization rate. If all those continue to come down, there's no reason we can't loosen not just the mask mandate, but the other restrictions as well. Thank
you. I have a non-COVID question for you.
Good.
And these questions keep on coming, so if you're good to go.
I'm good to go. Let's keep going. Great.
Okay. Well, this question has to do with, it's kind of a political question. When the federal government went totally blue, and then in New Hampshire went totally red in the last election. Can you comment on what your thoughts are in terms of why that happened?
How I did it? I mean, look, yeah, it's actually, I put a lot of emphasis because my roles and responsibility, I think the best government, the most responsive government is local. We put a lot of emphasis on the state house, the Republican Party at least, on getting back folks into the state house that believed in business, that believed in lower taxes, that believed in less government and less intrusion. That's what New Hampshire is all about. We had some challenges over the past couple of years getting things. We got a lot done, but it wasn't. There was a lot of potential infringement. I mean, they talked about an income tax. They talked about, I don't want to get overly political, but the stuff that was coming across my desk that I happily vetoed, by the way, I vetoed like 80 bills in the last 2 years, were things that had never come across any governor's desk in history. So think of it that way. But all of a sudden, this very radical stuff started coming across. that was a lot like New York or Connecticut, but it wasn't New Hampshire. And so, of course, we're going to say no to that. I worked really hard with whether it was for executive council candidates, House and Senate, to get folks in there that I think really appreciated and understood what the New Hampshire Advantage was all about. You can't take it for granted. It's hard work to maintain the New Hampshire Advantage. On the federal side, you know, the former President Trump just never really had a ground game here. He came and did rallies, but he never had a great ground retail political presence. And I think that didn't send the right tone and kind of put some of the Republicans' federal candidates at a disadvantage. Regardless of your party, you got to know how to knock on a door. You got to know how to sit down and have a cup of coffee with people. It's very, very important that you show yourself as a good listener. And I don't think the former president was a very good listener at a few things. I supported him, but I kept telling him to come and, you know, go to a coffee shop, do some more retail stuff, but they weren't really interested in that. So ultimately, it didn't bode very well for some of our federal, the Republican federal candidates. But on a state level, that's where the politics, if you will, and the policy really matters. I think people appreciate it, and they appreciate the value of that New Hampshire Advantage. That gets maintained at the state level, not so much in Congress. And I think that's fundamentally, it's a 30,000-foot view of why you had such a divide there. Thank you. We're ticket jumpers. We're purple. It's, you know, look, I'd love it if the whole state were red, but this is New Hampshire, and you got to earn it. I'm a big believer that any candidate can win any race. It's hard, but I do believe that because good candidates win. We've seen that. We've seen real conservative candidates win in very liberal districts, and very liberal candidates win in very conservative districts. So it's just about having good connection with people at the end of the day, and making sure not just that they agree with you on policy. That's not what getting elected is about. There has to be trust. At the end of the day, it has to be about trust, which is a weird thing to say, we're the government, just trust us. But here in New Hampshire at a local level, I don't say I'm the government, trust me. I say, I'm Chris Sununu. We can work together, right? There's a trust that we may not agree on every issue, but I'm going to be able to explain the hows and whys and what we're doing every time, as your local representatives and senators and executive councilors should as well. So I think it's just a very different dynamic of looking at things.
This next one sounds more like a suggestion than a question, but aside from elderly, the vast majority of illness and death from COVID has been in people with comorbidities. Are there any plans to have the Governor's Council on Fitness and or other public healthy living initiatives to reduce comorbidities?
So yes, if you have comorbidities, you can get your vaccination today, and that helps you, survive and not be in the hospital. I apologize, I couldn't hear. Could you repeat the actual question again, Tim?
Sure, I'm sorry about that. It talks about, are there any plans to have a Governor's Council on Fitness and or other public healthy living initiatives?
The quick answer there is no. I apologize. I don't completely get what the question is referencing. I'll just say, as it pertains to COVID, as it pertains to the dangers of the public health crisis that we're dealing with today, there were a lot of states that didn't look at comorbidities. We did it very, very early on. And we also gave doctors a lot of flexibility in making sure that if you had any sort of health issue, you could be prioritized in Group 1B to get the vaccination. As we move forward, out of COVID and beyond that, I guess, we have a couple different boards and commissions here with the Medical Society and others that do have public participants on it that would be able to engage more on long-term issues, strategy, planning, and policy as it pertains to individuals with comorbidity. I work a lot with individuals with rare disease disorders, and there's a lot of them out there. We have individuals, there are diseases in the state that literally only one or two people have, but they can be incredibly expensive, incredibly debilitating. And so we're always working with those folks to make sure that they have access to the pharmaceuticals they need, the medical treatments they need, those really severe and rare comorbidity issues just outside of COVID. One of the issues we're going to have long-term with comorbidity and COVID is the kids. Right now, this vaccine is not authorized for children. So if you're a child with medical issues, you can't get the vaccine. So we're prioritizing your parents and your caregivers to get the vaccine so they can kind of protect, but we're still going to have some potential isolation issues with that. And so we're hopeful that in the coming months, either one of the existing vaccines gets approved for children, or maybe a new one comes on the line. But that's kind of the next big issue around comorbidity, making sure kids have the same access to protection as everybody else.
Thank you, and I apologize if my sound was a little funky there. Can you speak to your read on when we may see easing of international travel restrictions?
So from a federal perspective, I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't have a whole lot of input. I know that the feds are always working on that and looking at that. I really haven't had a whole lot of input with the CDC about any of those potential restrictions. In terms of the state side, my sense is, again, as I've said, I don't mean to go ad nauseum on it, over the next month or two, as all these numbers really continue on a downward level and really start bottoming out, at a state level, I think the vast majority of the travel restrictions will disappear. So I think it's very soon at the state level, but I cannot speak to the federal administration. They seem more restrictive than I think a lot of us had previously anticipated right now, but hopefully they'll ease up on that.
Thank you. Next question has to do with staffing levels at Health and Human Services, so that they can be fully staffed to review and approve healthcare projects. I don't know if that's an issue, but could you comment on that?
Yeah, so, one thing that we did early on, we had a hiring freeze. I mean, I stopped all discretionary spending. I had a hiring freeze here for about 6 months because we just didn't know how bad the economy was going to get and whether the government was going to have dollars to actually keep things moving. We undid that hiring freeze in late fall, early winter, late 2020, let's say. It takes a couple months, and so most of the departments have all started that process of hiring. Unfortunately, government works so much slower than the private sector. It does take a couple months to fill positions. It's hard to find people still. We have a lot of people that are still, they're either concerned about COVID, they're watching their kids because they haven't been in school. My sense is we're going to have workforce challenges both in the public and the private sector till September and October of this year. When kids really are back, everyone's back in school 5 days a week. We really hit quote unquote normalcy. A lot of moms and dads start going back to work. My sense is we're still going to have to struggle a little bit here in terms of getting folks energized to re-enter the workforce, probably for another 6 months. But I think it does get much, much better. There's no doubt about that. I think my hope is that this new administration allows more flexibility for international workers to come in. I don't know if they will. The Trump administration was not was way overly restrictive on that, and that really hampered a lot of our businesses, especially in the travel and tourism industry. So I think this new administration has shown signs to be more flexible, but now with COVID, I'm not sure. So I think they're kind of in a little bit between a rock and a hard place, and hopefully they provide a lot more flexibility. That doesn't help the state workers per se, but more in the private sector. But I think we won't get back to a real workflow of normalcy probably until this fall.
Okay, Governor, the next one is kind of a follow-up. It appeared earlier, you answered the question about removing the mask mandate, but this person indicated that they had a close call at Pat's Peak recently with someone who was masked up and very difficult to identify, and there was an incident, and so they were concerned about the mask mandate, making it easy for people to be more anonymous than they should be. So I'm going to pose that more as a statement than a question.
Look, I mean, again, as soon as we can get out of the mask mandate, I want to get out of the mask mandate. Of course we do. Are there individual instances sometimes where you can't recognize someone, where you can't, see someone's lips if you're deaf or hard of hearing? You can't see people talk. That creates a bit of a problem. There's a lot of problems that can come with in terms of identifying and communicating with individuals when you're masked up. That's obvious. As soon as we can get out, we will. I mean, we're not going to change our policy based on specific incidences. Overall, the state has handled it really, 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 really well. There's no doubt about that. We've had instances in this business here and a little bit there, and we always are working with individuals. But at the end of the day, it's the data and the science and the safety. The masks work. I mean, look at the rate of flu. There's literally almost no flu in the state of New Hampshire. I think we have about 15 cases of flu in the whole state. 15, because we're protecting ourselves, because the masks work and we're not transmitting it. Sinus infections, ear infections in children, way, way, way down. They're about 10% of what they traditionally are. So the mask, the social distancing, from a health perspective, it has worked very, very well. But, and so we're not out of it yet. So as soon as we can, hopefully in the next month or two or whenever it might be, sooner than later, we're going to get out of this and allow that flexibility, better communication, identifying individuals. I have folks all the time. Look, you know, as governor, it's everybody walking around and you know, they're wearing masks. It can be a little disconcerting because I know there's a lot of folks out there. I've had protesters outside my house and all this kind of stuff, very aggressive against my family. So I don't like not being able to identify anyone. I know the state police that work with me in my security don't like not being able to identify folks, but it is necessary right now. And we just have to kind of do, I think, the best we can and keep doing that for at least a little while longer. We're getting close. We really are.
Last question, non-COVID related. Governor, can you talk about any major infrastructure projects you see coming down the pipeline for New Hampshire?
I think there's a lot of opportunity with infrastructure, especially with this, what we call the Biden bucks, right? If this $1.9 trillion bill passes, there's a massive amount of money that'll come into the state, a lot of which it's one-time money. So that should go to capital and infrastructure. It shouldn't go to ongoing programs because you'll create a budget problem down the road. And our budget is already very, very strong. So that means I think we're going to try to see what flexibility that the federal government gives us. Not only do the capital projects, I've already proposed 125 million or more of capital projects in my budget, but to do over and above that. And there is a lot of need. I think broadband infrastructure, some of the IT infrastructure at the state. I know they're looking at potentially the New Men's Prison. I know that's a tough one, but I mean, that place is not very good in a whole variety of different ways. And then you had COVID and bad ventilation and all of that. The state's going to have to invest in that at some point in the very near future. So, you know, if we can do it with the federal assistance rather than trying to bond or borrow money for it, we could do that. There's a whole bunch of different projects, dams, bridges, roads, our park system. I think all of these things are going to be on the table for discussion in terms of how some of these potential dollars could be spent. But there's undoubtedly going to be a lot of opportunity as long as the federal government gives us the flexibility to spend it how we want. And that's a little question whether they're going to do that. But if they can do that, I think there's just a ton of opportunity on the table that'll take the long-term tax burden off of the citizens, allow us to get our infrastructure at a state level, you know, where it really needs to be.
Governor, thank you so much for your accessibility. You answered a ton of questions. We really appreciate that very much. And, you know, we appreciate you taking your time to be with us today.
You bet. Well, thank you guys. And again, just keep the questions coming, whatever you might need in the future. We try to be as accessible as we possibly can. We know there's a lot of challenges, but we especially around COVID, but we really are coming to the end here. We're not quite out of it yet. Stay disciplined. We're at about mile 23 of the marathon. You got to finish those last few miles very, very strong. And if we do that, if we have the discipline to do that, no reason we won't have a phenomenal summer. It's going to be great.
Good to hear. Thank you so much, Governor.
Thanks, guys.
And thank you to Lincoln Financial for sponsoring this event again. And we look forward to seeing you again next week, hopefully, at our legislative update. So thanks again, everybody. And Governor, have a great day.